and welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Lyndall Curtis. Today is our regular look at foreign affairs with Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg and Green Senator Lee Rhiannon. We'll talk about Afghanistan in a minute, but we couldn't let the day pass without mention of the House of Representatives vote on one of the bills on same-sex marriage, a vote that was lost. It's an issue, a debate, which has led to the resignation of one Liberal frontbencher, Cory Bernardi. We'll go first to the reaction to the House of Representatives vote, which was lost 42 votes to 98.
Unfortunately, we haven't won the debate in the Australian Parliament, but I say this in the words of another great Australian, maintain your age, because I'm quite confident that in about 10 years' time, some or all of us are going to be attending a wedding, a same-sex marriage that'll be both conducted and recognised here in Australia.
When you have a gay child, you realise that that child is seen as second-rate in its own country, and that is not fair at all. And it doesn't matter what they do or how they earn their living, it still means they are second-rate. They're good enough to stand up and protect you when it comes to danger, heal them when they're sick, but they are not good enough to have their relationship recognised. And I think this government, the whole of the Parliament that voted against this, should just be ashamed.
Josh and Lee, welcome to the program. Josh, if I could start with you. Sure. You voted today in the House of Representatives. You didn't support this bill, but it was not a clear-cut decision for you, was it?
Well, I have been on the record of supporting civil unions, but I've also said that marriage is between a man and a woman, Lyndall, and I think today's vote, 98 to 42, was pretty comprehensive. But let's say that this debate has been very healthy. I think it's got members of Parliament out into their electorate speaking to people about the issue of gay marriage, and I must say there are very strongly held views on both sides of the debate.
And did you find that in your electorate
Sure.
too, that it was not all on one side or the
Sure.
other?
Look, opinion was divided and people had different reasons for taking different positions, but it certainly was a very healthy process, and I benefited greatly from meeting with people with views on both sides of the debate.
Lee, the issue is being debated in the Senate, although a different piece of legislation. Do you expect in the end the Senate vote will mirror the one in the House of Representatives, that there will be a group of senators who support it, but the majority won't?
It seems that will be the case because Tony Abbott isn't allowing a conscience vote, which is interesting for a party that's supposed to have individual views, that's not being allowed in this case. So it looks like it will go down. So I understand, and we've just heard that many gay and lesbian people and their families would be very disappointed. But we will get there. Same-sex marriage equality will happen. We will be able to enjoy the weddings. And today was a process in getting to that point. Senator Sarah Hanson-Young introduced the first marriage equality bill in 2008, and 4 years later we're having the debate, and I'm quite confident that the legislation will come in.
Josh, do you think it's only a matter of time before the views of parliamentarians change on this, or do you think there's many whose views won't change?
There's definitely many whose views won't change, and there is still a long way to go in this debate too. So as I said, Lyndall, I think it's very healthy. I think there is a diverse range of opinions. I think it's an ongoing debate in the community, but the coalition took a very strong position based on its policy going into the last election, and we like to keep our promises.
If I could go now to the issue of Cory Bernardi,
Sure.
who in his speech to the Senate last night suggested that same-sex marriage might lead to polygamy. He questioned whether it might even lead to bestiality. He has resigned after a conversation with the opposition leader this morning. Do you think that was the right action, Josh?
Well, look, he's taken that decision after a discussion with the leader, and that's a decision for him. But his comments were highly inappropriate, and I can understand why they were deeply offensive to many people. They should not have been said. I certainly wouldn't have used those words, and nor would many of my colleagues. But, you know, in Cory's place, since he's resigned, are two very able coalition members, Arthur Sinodinos, who's got extensive experience, and Jamie Briggs too. And I think they'll bring a real bonus to the coalition team.
Lee, can you really draw a line when politicians are debating something they feel passionately about between what people should say and shouldn't say?
Oh yes, I think clearly Senator Bernardi was offensive, deeply offensive, and it's worth remembering that the majority of Australians support marriage equality. 64% is what the polls are showing, and I think one of the big issues to come out of Senator Bernardi's comments was how Tony Abbott handled it. That while I understand he accepted the resignation, he didn't condemn the comments.
That's not true.
No.
He's actually deeply, repudiated the comments by Cory Bernardi. He's put out a statement. He's made a statement in the House. You're in the Senate, Lee. I can tell you he made a statement in the House about it, and he says that is not the position of the Liberal Party. We have had a proud tradition of working against any discrimination against people of the in terms of same-sex relationships.
Well,
so Tony absolutely took a very strong position on Cory's words.
Well, that's good to hear. The report that I read just talked about him disciplining him rather than rejecting the comments.
Don't
so that's
read everything,
good.
Don't believe everything
Yes,
you read.
that's true.
I do have to raise this because it was the subject of Senate discussion last week. Lee, your own previous comments in a speech in, I think, 2009 in relation to whether Al-Qaeda was to blame or not for the 9/11 attacks were raised, and you had to repudiate those. You've also faced controversy in the past for your support of the policy of boycott, divestment and sanctions against Israel. So the politicians say controversial things quite a lot. Is it something for which people should lose frontbench positions?
Well, I think to compare what Mr Bernardi had said to what I have said in my own actions, I think I actually find that offensive.
Yours are a lot worse, Lee.
Well,
because
I think you're going into dangerous ground there, Josh.
No,
I mean,
your
I've
comments
given a
about
personal...
9/11.
If we could just let...
No, my comments
Lee
about
speak.
I have never denied that 9/11 was a terrorist attack. Senator Sinodinos was down in the gutter last week making his statements about myself that were just totally out of order and incorrect, and I have had a personal explanation in the Parliament about that. And to compare that with what Senator Bernardi said about bestiality in an important debate on marriage equality is just unacceptable.
If we could turn now to the issue of Afghanistan, the International Security Assistance Force has scaled back its operations with Afghan allies because of the increase in rogue attacks by Afghan often soldiers on Western forces. There have been 51 Western soldiers killed this year. 3 of them are Australians. Lee, is that scaling back of partnered operations at lower than battalion level likely to have an impact on the sort of cooperation that's needed to bring Afghan forces up to the position where they can take responsibility for security in their own country?
Well, you'd have to say that whole attempt to provide training to the Afghan security forces is now in disarray, and the need for Australian troops to be withdrawn immediately and safely is the position the Greens will continue to advocate. I mean, we've already seen the Netherlands has withdrawn its troops, New Zealand and France are on the way. Even the United States has withdrawn 23,000 of its own troops. We need to be moving over to looking to the a greater era of development assistance for Afghan, so the Afghan people can get on and meet these challenges.
Do you accept, though, that the Afghan forces need the help of Western forces to get up to a level where they can provide security in their own country?
The Afghan people clearly don't want foreign forces in that country, and clearly the Afghanistani people face enormous difficulties. There's corruption within their government, there is enormous destruction of infrastructure, and the hope that the security forces would be trained has really not been delivered. So we need to withdraw the troops and allow the Afghani people to get on with reconstructing their country.
Josh, the rogue attacks, what are called green on blue attacks, do have great potential, don't they, to damage the trust between the troops. That's really needed to be able to train and partner in the sorts of operations that are being run.
Look, it is important, but I wonder if Lee's been to Afghanistan. Have you been to Afghanistan?
No.
Well, I've actually been to Afghanistan, and I've seen firsthand, Lyndall, the important work that our 1,500 troops, men and women in uniform, have been doing there. It's a vitally important mission for Australia because Afghanistan was the headquarters for the Taliban, was headquarters for global terrorism, and we've lost more than 100 1,500 people in terrorist attacks, whether it was in Bali or the Trade Center bombings. And so we had to be there, and we've made a real difference. We now have more than 350,000 Afghan police and Afghan army. They will help keep the peace when we draw down in 2014. So, you know, this is a challenging situation, but there is still going to be joint patrols at the battalion level, and below that's going to require the regional commander approval. But I think, you know, we have made a real difference on the ground. I mean, I went there and I went to a girls' school. For the first time, girls were going to school in Afghanistan. There is now governance structures in place. You know, there is now a proper society that is forming rather than what was seen under the Taliban. So it's been hugely costly. We've lost tragically 38 Australian lives, and many, many more have been injured, both from Australia and other countries. But we needed to be there, and we need to stay the course.
But that question of trust will be important too in the long term for some of the things Lee's spoken about, and what will be a longer term Australian commitment for aid and development assistance as well, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we're hoping that the situation on the ground can stabilise, and, you know, we can understand why this has been taken as a precautionary measure. 51 personnel, as you say, have been killed in these attacks, including Australians. So, you know, something had to be done. But, you know, the bulk of the Afghanistan people, certainly the bulk of those 350,000 Afghan police and army, actually want to stabilise their country, want to improve the situation for both men and women going forward.
Lee, there will be, and I think we've talked about before, that longer term assistance that countries like Australia will need to provide to help Afghanistan long into the future. Should that be assistance be being increased now, or is the sorts of timetables that governments like Australia have laid out adequate to the task?
Oh, I think a lot of those questions are still to be answered. There was a major conference on these issues recently that Foreign Minister Bob Carr attended in Japan, and again that's why the Greens initiated an inquiry into Australia's aid to Afghanistan to be able to answer some of those questions. The Greens can see very good grounds for increasing the aid. The point that Josh made about young women being able to attend school is very important, but we also need to be able to build those democratic structures. But the Afghani people need to be able to do this themselves. And going back to this issue about that we're just addressing with regard to the operational changes, it's interesting that the British government have ordered a cabinet level review of what has happened there in recent times, because it looks as though NATO is giving confusing messages about how they're handling this. And that, I would hope the opposition would be putting pressure on the Prime Minister to have a similar inquiry here.
Josh, just very quickly, it will be dangerous though for Australian troops for a while, yeah, won't it?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a danger zone. But, you know, what they're doing over there, Lyndall, is making Australians safer here. And so we have to understand why we went there. It was because it was the HQ, the headquarters for global terrorism, and because we have an important, steadfast alliance with the United States.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. Josh Frydenberg and Lee Rhiannon, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lyndall.
Thank you, Lee.
And thank you for joining Capitol Hill. Please be with us at the same time tomorrow. Good night.